Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for the Superintendent's Report. I'm Carol Birdsong and joining me is Superintendent Jason Golden, and we are starting the new school year off strong, Superintendent Golden. So we will be talking about the start of the school year, action that our school board took as we record this last night. As we record on a Tuesday, the board met last night, Monday evening on the 15th of August. So let's start with the start of the school year because it's been a great start so far.
Well, we're about 2 weeks into school, but yesterday as we record was the first day for kindergarten, our early childhood program, and our pre-K program. So when those students start, it really feels like the beginning of a school year, especially for them. When we started the school year on, with all our grades, all but kindergarten and younger, we had an unbelievably good start. It was exciting. Families were happy. They had done a lot of prep work with some back to school events prior to the first day. So folks had started getting to know each other again, coming back from those summer breaks. We did a lot of work with our staffing. We have a lot of exciting items to talk about. But it just did my heart good, and it always does my heart good to see the excitement on students' faces. I will say, Carol, I mentioned kindergarten. The bit of sadness I saw that first day of school was from kindergarten siblings who couldn't go to school that first day with their older brothers and sisters.
That's right.
And so yesterday, kindergarten started, and that was that second round of excitement. And it was...
They wanted to start when their older brothers and sisters started.
That's right. They wanted to start when their siblings started, but they got to start yesterday, and it was a lot of tears for parents. I heard a couple of stories from parents about their spouses who dropped their children off thinking they were going to be good. They were going to be tough about it, but there were a lot of tears.
Yeah.
I want families to know that they are in good hands. We've got professionals who get into the profession out of love. They're really good at what they do, and they make sure that they take care of your children. We recognize the importance of taking care of your children during those hours that they're in school. Those kindergartners have a lot of years ahead of them, but boy, it's going to go fast.
It will go fast. It sure will. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because now I'm going to give a plug. We have so many wonderful pictures and videos of back to school across the county, and shout out to our Good News ambassadors who are school employees who help us by taking pictures and video clips, help us in the communications department throughout the school year, and shout out to them for capturing those first days. And if you missed it, go take a look at our InFocus email newsletter that's on our website at wcs.edu. All of our social media channels have video and pictures, and wow, it's just so exciting and so fun. It was great. We were at Thompson Station on the first day of school. So fun, so fun. We have a new principal there, Tiffany Dukes, and the families just loved her, and it was great to see that. And anyway, it was fun.
Well,
start.
This conversation actually reminded me, one of the key items that we mentioned to our parents a few weeks ago before school started was volunteers are welcome in our schools. Last year we felt like the myth was continuing that families and parents weren't welcome in our schools, and we've been trying to make sure everyone knows volunteers are welcome. So we talked about the tiers. Parents were able to drop off their children in their classrooms that first day, but we are looking for volunteers. I know we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about staffing, because that's been a big discussion point, especially in Middle Tennessee in our high growth area. So there are some spots for volunteers where parents can do a lot of good for their children and for the children of other folks, coming in and helping fill in some of those volunteer spots.
So remind everybody now, how can you volunteer?
Well, we are actually very careful, number one, with student safety. That's our number one. That is our baseline to make sure students are safe. So we want volunteers in our schools to do those specific items that can help teachers fulfill their mission. We have a tiered system for volunteers. We have tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is for volunteers who we know will be doing some work that might not have any direct contact with students in a school setting. Working in concession stands, some of the PTO.
Guest speaker in a classroom.
Correct, because you've got that that contact with a teacher during that time. So that's tier 1, and we just have the volunteers scheduled, and they will be around adults throughout that time. We have a Tier 2 process where a volunteer might have access to personal student information, grades, etc. Some of the office work might include that. And you actually sign off on a confidentiality agreement that our teachers commit to in their profession based on the federal law, FERPA. It's an acronym, kind of comparable to HIPAA. For medical records, but for student records, to make sure that you'll honor that student's privacy. Then we have a Tier 3 volunteer system for parents and grandparents and other volunteers who might, based on their volunteer work, be one-on-one with a student. We actually do a fingerprint check to make sure that we do that extra level to make sure that students are safe. That's the Tier 3 volunteer. Many of our parents who help out on field trips sign off on that and go through that fingerprinting process just to give that extra reassurance to families that your children are in good hands during that time. We're looking for volunteers. We initiated this process years ago. We have literally thousands of parents commit to that process so that they can help volunteer in our schools, knowing that help is important so our students can see that help.
That's right. All areas are open for volunteers. So let's talk about staffing. You reported to the board last night that we've done pretty well. We've hired well over 500. Our Human Resources Department has processed more than 500 teachers in addition to other staff members, but we still need staff.
Well, that's right. So we have about 3,300 teachers, to give you perspective. You mentioned 500. I think we had about 560 new hires this year of our 3,300 or so teacher cohort. It's more than we've had in previous years. Typically, we're hiring somewhere around 400 and change new teachers. This year, we needed more, and we were able to get them. I let our board know that we are staffed in the teacher cohort at 98.5%. For most businesses, that's pretty incredible. You're staffed at 98.5%. Statistically speaking, that's really good for us, but we know that every spot where there's not a teacher, it makes things difficult. Generally speaking, we're well covered in classroom teachers. We're still short on special education teachers. Some of our more advanced classes, mathematics and science, some of those traditional gaps where it's really hard to find enough licensed teachers are our spots in that 1.5%. So we continue to look, we continue to recruit. But compared to what we hear in the media, especially in this region, with a shortage of teachers, we've been very pleased with our recruiting process. Also, Carol, retention of our highly trained, excellent teachers is very important to us. We put a real effort in through the board work and through our county commission funding body over the past year or so to increase our teachers' salaries. We've made some pretty significant inroads. It's not enough. We continue to put that effort in. But we recognize that more and more, with there being fewer teachers coming out of the graduate programs, and nationally, there's going to be a higher premium on retaining our teachers, creating a good work environment for them. We've asked our parents to help out with that, with some of our early communication, especially from a parent-teacher communication standpoint, to make sure that we do support our teachers. Another piece of that is, over the course of the summer, there's a lot of discussion in Nashville about a conversation that made the news that a president of a small school out of Michigan made when he was visiting Middle Tennessee, disparaging teachers. And the comments surrounded this basic argument he had that education schools weren't great. They educated teachers poorly. Folks weren't smart who got into education. And I want to make sure, and our board wants to make sure, that our community knows that has not been our experience. Some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in the scope of my life have been teachers. And they take that intelligence and they professionalize it with their work. With the work they do through the collegiate and master's and doctoral programs and the pedagogy of how to teach, our teachers are doing an excellent job. Not just anybody can teach.
Ditto, yes, emphasize that. Not just anybody can teach. It is tough.
And if you've substituted, you recognize that what our teachers are doing in the classroom for our students is incredible. A month or so ago, we celebrated our achievement data from our students. Our students in the TCAP data were #1 in ELA, #1 in the state in ELA, #1 in the state in math, #1 in the state in social studies, and #1 in the state in science. That doesn't happen by accident. We have excellent teachers, and we are encouraging our families to recognize that and support it. Many of you who are watching this came to Williamson County for that reason, and we're good at it, and it's because of our teachers' work.
Well, you just opened the door for me to make another announcement. So we're going to, on this program, the growth data has been released by the state, and we are, again, tops in the state. We have 5s. You can, the range is 1 to 5, and we have 5s in all areas on our growth data from last year. So let's celebrate that.
So the state measures us in 2 main ways. They measure us by achievement, and they measure us with growth. And I spoke just a minute ago to our achievement scores, and that's the ultimate score, how well you do. But they also measure how well students grow from one year to the next. And the system, we live by acronyms. TVAS, TVAAS is the growth system.
You may hear value added.
Value added.
Yeah.
It's a complicated formula that is designed to measure how well a student grows from one year to the next. It's based in part on a goal of having a year's growth. But they also set goals related to how well a student did in previous years. So when a student did a little bit better above that year's growth, there's a measure for growth that's even higher than that number ultimately, and it's that complicated formula. So the state has a numbering system on 1 through 5 for growth, and they measure districts by that. They measure schools by that, they measure individual content areas by that, and they measure students by that and drill down to the individual student. The state released the district-wide data in particular content areas just today as we're recording. We are thrilled to have seen that growth data where our students got 5s. A 3 is a year's growth. That's the goal. That's the measure. 3 is not mediocre. 3 is excellent because you've made that year's growth. So when you take achievement, where we're tops in the state, if we had a 3, we achieved the top and we grew appropriately if it was a 3. Our school system is a 5 in all content areas, in ELA, literacy, in math, in science and social studies. They also do a composite through this program for numeracy and literacy to measure math and English, which are some real focus points. We were 5s across the board. In other words, we grew substantially more than the expectations. Now that presents an annual challenge.
It does.
Right, because statistically speaking, over time, we ought to be at a 3 on a growth curve. So we're going to be drilling down into individual spots because we know we always have room to grow in specific content areas at specific grade levels. But we are so proud of the work our teachers and students did this past year in growing. For the last 2 years or so, we've been talking about how well we've been doing, especially compared to our peers even nationally. We talked about our national blue ribbon schools and some of those other measures. But these measures that the state releases are so very important because it is really about how well our students are preparing themselves from year to year. So we are super proud of that growth factor. If you measure achievement plus growth, what we did last year in the environment that we were in is incredible.
Incredible. And that continues to raise the bar. And that's what we do in Williamson County Schools. That bar continues to get raised.
Well, and Carol, you mentioned raising the bar. We know that we have to continue to grow. We have to continue to innovate if we are to grow. For the last 25 or 30 years, there's been discussions in education circles about what's called professional learning communities, PLCs. You may hear that phrase. For us, to give a little drill down into what we're talking about when you hear that phrase is, our teachers have common assessments, common tests, common formative assessments that help measure how well our students are mastering particular standards at their particular grade level in particular content areas. What we have learned is that if teachers spend time working with their peers, analyzing how well their students do on those particular standards that are state standards, they can compare their work to their next door neighbor, learn from each other, and help their students master the standards that they might have struggled on in a particular classroom. To use an old phrase, a rising tide raises all boats. We have put an effort and an emphasis on that this year to give our teachers, especially at the elementary level, extra time to work together in that professional learning community to drill down to how well their students are doing on common assessments to help grow every student no matter what classroom you're in. That's our next focus point. If we're going to continue to grow as that bar increases, our teachers are going to need more time to do that kind of work, to be efficient in how they help our students master those Tennessee standards.
And so we have early release days for our elementary schools. There is still just a little bit of misinformation out there about that, about having to pick up your child at that first release time. Clarify what school dismissal will look like for families at our elementary schools on an early release day.
Thank you for that. I'm going to start with the secondary, middle, and high school. For years we have had late start Mondays. Many of our Mondays, 27 or so a year, we do late start. We run our buses on on the regular schedule in the morning. Students can come in later with their parents if they wish, and we take care of them for those 45 minutes or so before school starts. For elementary this year, we are having late start Wednesdays. We have 11 of them.
You mean early release?
I'm sorry, thank you for that.
Okay.
Early release, 11 Wednesday afternoons. Those 11 days are strategically placed to be scheduled soon after those students take some of those formative assessments that I spoke to, so that teachers can have time to look and see how their students did on mastering those Tennessee standards. Our teachers will be drilling down to individual students and how well they did in mastering the standards that were taught, especially in English language arts and in math. So those days are strategically placed, number one. You asked about how the schedule works. The schedule is designed for families to be able to pick up their children and students ride the bus home on those early release days. Strictly speaking, it's 112 minutes earlier than a normal release day. About 2 hours or so we're going to release early, 11 days over the course of the year. But for families who can't pick up their child or who don't have somebody waiting at home and they're not comfortable with a child going home those 2 hours early, we are running a second round of buses after the secondary schools run their bus routes. So ordinarily we do secondary routes and then elementary on release times. On those 11 days this year, we're going to run the elementary routes when we release. The bus drivers will go run their high school and middle school routes. They will come back and run a second round of buses really close to the ordinary release time for elementary schools for those families who can't pick up their children or whose children can't ride that first round of buses. So the design is, if you can pick up your child, if your child can go home, great, they can be home those extra 2 hours. If you can't, we are accommodating that. So the hope is that it's not going to inconvenience any parent, but we are encouraging folks, if you can pick up your child, take them home. We have added 7 minutes to every school day so that we can buy that time for those 11 days over the course of the year. We've been doing that for years at our high schools and middle schools. I think a lot of folks never even noticed that we actually started and had a 7-minute longer school day at middle schools and high schools than we did at elementary. If you balance that over the course of the year, generally speaking, you're not going to notice those extra 7 minutes. But we're making sure that we haven't lost any instructional time to squeeze out some additional planning time for teachers so that we can take that next step to continue to serve your students better, your
Now,
children.
I do want to be clear, there will not be any organized activity. Your child will be supervised, though, by an adult, a staff member, and at the school, and there may be an opportunity to get homework done, read a book, etc.
As we spoke about volunteers, I mentioned safety has to be number one. Likewise, we're going to make sure our students stay safe. They will be supervised. It's not going to be a camp program. They'll have the opportunity to, if there's any homework, they'll have the opportunity to do that. We're going to make sure they're taken care of, but we're not programming it because our teachers are going to be working on those drill downs to talk about your child's growth in mastering those Tennessee standards.
Okay, very good. I want to circle back because we talked about staffing of educators. Let's talk about staffing of the support areas and where those needs are. And that means your bus drivers, your food service workers, maintenance, those sort of roles that are so very, very important to our school district. How are we doing staffing-wise there?
Thank you for that. I mentioned that our teacher staffing was at 98.5% district-wide. Our classified positions, what we call classified, some of those support positions, we have three key areas where we're actually struggling. Special education teachers assistants, we're at about 91% staffing. We have over 600 special education TA positions district-wide. We serve about 43,000 students, so the raw numbers can feel overwhelming. We still need special education teachers assistants. I am very concerned about that because we know our students need that extra help. Now, if you do the math, if we're 91%, you know, around 600, we're missing about 60 or so positions, somewhere around there. We have about 50 schools. On average, that's somewhere between 1 and 2 teachers assistant positions per school missing. We need that extra help. Our bus drivers, compared to our budget, we are staffed at about 82%. Now, we have a bus driver assigned to every route, but we're doing one thing that we really would rather not do if we were fully staffed, and that's first and second loads. Especially in some of the elementary schools where we have some suburban areas where you can finish a route in about half an hour. We're running a first load, going back, picking up students, running a second load. It's not ideal. We know historically a lot of high growth areas have had to do that, even first, second, and third loads in some locations. But we need to squeeze that time in. So that's one struggle that we have because we're at 82% staffing for bus drivers. But the biggest one right now for us is we have a bus driver assigned to every route, but we don't have anywhere near enough substitute bus drivers when someone calls in sick. Life happens. There will be sick days every single day, as large as we are. We need bus drivers so that we can have enough substitute bus drivers. It may be that if we hire you, we'll assign you a route and somebody else will become a substitute driver. So don't think we're just hiring for substitute drivers. We have our own training system that's state approved, where we actually help and train individuals to get commercial driver's licenses with the appropriate endorsements, what they call P&S, passenger and school endorsements. We also have a tester, a state-approved tester. The Tennessee Department of Safety, the troopers, actually monitor us and analyze the quality of the training that we're doing. They audit us, and they're on our campus a lot, monitoring that. So we're looking for drivers. Finally, our food service department is looking for staffing. We are short about 40 or so part-time positions in our food service department. Actually, our volunteers help out with that.
They do,
and
yes.
fill in some of those gaps. So we would love to have you. One extra thing I want to mention related to bus drivers, we offer health insurance. Even though bus drivers typically don't work a 40-hour week because they run routes in the morning and in the afternoon, they might do some field trips, and so sometimes they'll get over 40, but we offer full health insurance for full-time bus drivers who run those morning and afternoon routes, regardless of whether they hit that line of 35 or 40 hours.
Okay, very good. So go online, wcs.edu, under careers, and apply, because we would love to have you in Williamson County Schools. Let's talk about a law that will take effect this school year that will affect our current third grade class. There's been quite a bit of discussion about it. The board has passed a resolution regarding that. It's third grade retention law. it's got a lot to it. It's difficult to actually even sit here and explain, but do your best, please, and talk about what every elementary school family really needs to know.
So 2 years ago, in the 2020 legislative session, if I have that right, maybe a year ago. In any event,
yeah.
we've been through 2 summers of it. The legislature passed a law that, in essence, said if a 3rd grader is below proficient in 3rd grade TCAP ELA, they have to be retained in 3rd grade.
ELA is English Language Arts.
Thank you for that, because we live by acronyms.
Yes.
If in the English scores they are below proficient, and now the language is either below expectations or approaching expectations, they have to be retained in 3rd grade unless they go to the summer program. They call it summer camp in the law. For practical purposes, it's a 4-week summer school program, or depending on where they fall in the testing, take tutoring over the course of the following year. That's one piece of it. There's also an impact on 4th graders, that for those 4th graders who at 3rd grade were in that boat, if they haven't shown growth in English by the time they finish 4th grade, they have to be retained in 4th grade and not move on to 5th. There are a lot of details to it. You can't be retained more than once under these rules. If you have a disability that affects your reading, you may be exempted from it. If you're an English language learner in the first 2 years of taking English language classes coming from a different language, you're exempt from this. But generally speaking, there's a long continuum that could ultimately lead to many 3rd graders and many 4th graders being retained if they don't meet those requirements. We are very concerned about it long term. The law has been in place for 2 years, but the mandatory portion of the retention is to take effect at the end of this school year. So we've started communicating that. When this law was passed, there was a lot of discussion publicly about the impact of this and concerns. What happens to someone who's retained for this when they're 18 years old and might be a junior in high school? Is the dropout rate going to continue? But more specifically, what happens to a child who struggles with testing because of anxiety and other issues? Is it the wise thing to make this an end-all be-all? If you don't show growth in this particular measure, you will be retained. That's the discussion we've had with our board just recently. Our board passed a resolution asking the legislature in this coming session to eliminate the requirement that a student must be retained based solely on the existing criteria, because we believe there's a lot more to an individual child than one single score. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the interventions are good interventions. We have experienced 2 summers of our summer program, what the state calls summer camp. Carol, it's good.
It is.
Those interventions are good. We have spent a lot of time tutoring students who need that extra help. We have tiered processes where students get into interventions during the school year. All those things are helping students grow. Some of the things I've mentioned earlier about our teachers drilling down into students mastering standards, all of those items are important. But to rely just on one particular score and require a child to be retained without considering that child in any other aspect of their needs, we think that's unwise in the long term.
We always say that a teacher knows their students best.
The teachers and the principals and parents, for goodness sake. The existing structure we have is that principals are responsible for making retention decisions in consultation with parents. And so ultimately we think that's the wisest thing. Now, in Tennessee, when we talk about English language arts scores with TCAP and whether a student has reached that proficiency level, our numbers don't look good. We are number 1 in the state, and last year we had 34% of our 3rd grade students at either the approaching or below level. We recognize that is a need for growth. Statewide, if I'm not mistaken, they're around 64, 65% below that. So there's a practical aspect to this as well. are we going to have that large chunk of students retained in 3rd and 4th grade? What does that mean for the state? Can that even be staffed? Some of those questions haven't fully been answered. But I'm convinced that the interventions are appropriate, but ultimately our board took the position, and they're asking the legislature to consider that that reason alone is not a good reason to retain someone in 3rd or 4th grade.
Hopefully the legislature will hear us and change course on that. We're out of time, but we have to talk about, as we end this, the start of the school year. Friday Night Lights starts this Friday night, and the big game in the county is Fairview versus Page at Fairview. The Battle of 840. 7 o'clock kickoff. So we want to make sure that you're well aware. You can check out In Focus for a list of those ball games. But not just football. We have so many different activities taking place, and we want to encourage you to get involved. Take in a ball game, go to a volleyball match, watch your marching band perform. So much is going on right now, and this is a great opportunity for you to be involved and come out and support the students of Williamson County Schools.
There's life on our campuses. Football, volleyball, girls soccer, cross country, all those fall sports. Our bands, Carol, our marching bands are incredible.
They are.
It's really neat for me to see the approach that different bands have, their traditions. I think about Franklin High School's marching band and the precision of their work, and then Nolensville's high school band, which is a newer band.
So unique in what they do at Nolensville
and the entertainment value that they bring to it.
Yeah.
Later on this fall, we're going to have a celebration where all our marching bands get to perform all in one night. That's a great event. Check your schedules for that. And I got to put a plug in for the app that I know you and your department helped create.
Okay.
You can pull down the WCS app, and I'm going to get you to specify it. I've got it on my phone. I can't remember what it's called.
Williamson County Schools.
Williamson County Schools. Go to the App Store, Williamson County Schools. You can click on individual schools, and you can have a calendar of extracurricular events at the schools that you want to visit.
Thank you for that
great.
plug. Thank you. The Communications Department thanks you very much. And we hope you do download our mobile app. It is a wealth of information for you. Thank you for watching, and Superintendent Golden, thank you. We'll do this again next month.
All right.